And the City Council and Redevelopment Agency met in closed session on the items that were listed on the special meeting agenda. An update was provided to the Council and the Redevelopment Agency on all the items that are listed on the agenda, and the following action items were taken. First, with respect to the claim of Ismael Rodriguez, and now I've lost track of my notes, excuse me. On the claim of Ismael Rodriguez, on a motion by Councilmember Davis, second by Councilmember Cassis, and a 5-0 vote, that claim was rejected. Next, with respect to the claim of Liberty Mutual, subrogee of Kathleen Wong, on a motion by Councilmember Atkin and second by Mayor Atkin, second by Councilmember Davis, and a 5-0 vote. The claim was accepted in full in the amount of $856.41. And then next, with respect to the claim of the National Railroad Passenger Corporation doing business as Amtrak, on a motion by Councilmember Davis, seconded by Vice Mayor Cassis, and a 5-0 vote, that claim was rejected. Next, with respect to existing litigation in the matter of the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency versus LTEX, an update was provided to the Redevelopment Agency, and direction was given to its negotiator, Mr. O'Keefe, relative to potential terms of settlement of that matter. And then with respect to real estate negotiations between the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency and Starbucks Coffee regarding a potential sublease at the Promenade retail site on San Pablo Avenue, a direction was given to Mr. O'Keefe relative to the terms of a proposed sublease on a motion by, Councilmember Bukowski and seconded by Councilmember Davis, and a 3-2 vote, and Councilmembers Cassis and Fricke were voting no relative to the site layout, but otherwise it was a 5-0 vote as to the overall notion of the sublease. And then there was a discussion regarding performance evaluation of the city attorney, and no action was taken. With that, I have nothing further.
Thanks. I'll adjourn the closed session, and thank you all for your patience in us getting a late start here with our study session, which I'll now call to order. Any citizens to be heard? Okay, tonight we have a presentation on family housing by Bridge. Amy, are you introducing this? Okay, before we do that, I just want to say we have got another hour that the polls are open tonight for anybody listening. So if you haven't done your civic duty, I'll just put in a little pitch there. Thanks, Amy.
Good evening, Mayor Atkin and fellow council members. This study session is being presented in response to housing policy discussions that have been held at both the Housing Committee and council levels during 2006. Both policy bodies have reviewed the city's affordable housing production status and the methods that the city has utilized to obtain a range of affordable housing choices. In addition, the Housing Committee has had a presentation from Bridge on family housing development and has made recommendations on some revisions to the ordinance, also known as the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, relating to the process that the city uses to designate below market rate units. In tonight's presentation, staff will be presenting a number of potential revisions to the housing set-aside ordinance for your review that have been recommended by the Housing Committee, as well as an analysis of potentially changing the ordinance income mandate from the current moderate income to a mix of very low, and moderate income levels. We have tonight, per your request in April, a presentation by Ann Silverberg, who's the Director of Acquisitions at Bridge Housing, on projects they've developed that have been targeted to families with children. The way I'd like to proceed with the presentations is to invite her up to first present, and then I will present these various ordinance revisions, and then after that we can have discussion and questions. So I'll call up Ann at this point. That's good.
Good evening, Mayor Atkin and fellow council members. Thank you very much for inviting me here today to talk to you about family housing. Again, I'm Ann Silverberg, and I work with Bridge Housing. And for those of you who don't know Bridge, we are a nonprofit affordable housing development company.
Excuse
We're
me for
based in
interrupting you a second. Could you talk right into that
Right
microphone?
into- sure, there's-
Because otherwise it's not gonna get out there.
Better.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks.
Okay. So Bridge Housing Corporation is a nonprofit affordable housing company based in San Francisco. We work all throughout the Bay Area as well as parts of Southern California. And while I definitely do not have all of the answers about family housing, we have built several family developments, and I thought I could talk a little bit about some of our experiences. I have some photos to show you here on the computer. I guess it will come up on your screen. I guess there are also some project pages that you've received in your packets. If you have additional information that you'd like, we'd be happy to get that to you as well. The first thing I would say about Emeryville, it seems to me that Emeryville is quite diverse in terms of its resident population and employee population, and this is very much the same as the rest of the Bay Area, although there are a few parts of the Bay Area where there's a little more predictability and consistency in that when you build housing at a certain income level, you're pretty sure that you're going to have some families moving in. For example, in Napa, we've built 3 developments in Napa, and we built at a certain income level rental housing, and we had many families move in. And so our first development, we had many 3-bedroom units. Then the next one, many more 3-bedroom units, and then some 4-bedroom units. I have a slide here. And then we incorporated soccer fields and basketball courts and other things. And there the challenge was just making sure that we had the units that would accommodate the needs of the families that we knew were going to be living there. But in many parts of the Bay Area, and I believe this to be true in Emeryville, there's not that same level of predictability or that same correlation, and so you don't know for sure when you're building new developments if they are going to attract families. And so I think it's more of a, I wouldn't say quite field of dreams scenario, but something like that where if you build it, they will come. If you can design and build units that are sized for families and are attractive to families, and if the developments include amenities and programs and services that are attractive to families, well, then you'll have a higher likelihood of attracting families. And the other part of this, when you're talking about amenities, is neighborhood amenities. If you have amenities in the neighborhood that are close to the development, schools, libraries, parks, of course, that's also going to help attract families to the development. In the case of affordable housing, there are many financing sources that require that the development is within a certain proximity to those neighborhood amenities, so it's quite important. I'm going to talk about a few developments here, and I have some photos, as I say. Some of these are not exactly applicable to Emeryville. Maybe the density is off, but it's still worth looking at. This one here is a 306-unit development located in Milpitas. It's called Monte Vista. As I say, 306 units, 735 parking places. It's a pretty big development, but at 20 units an acre, it's a little less dense than what you might see here. But in this development, we have a few amenities that were particularly attractive to families. We didn't design it necessarily as family housing. We knew there would be families, but there were many more families than we expected. There are close to 200 children here on the site. The main concept of the design was the landscape spine. It's basically a big green area that runs the length of the development and or the length of the site, and there are amenities that are sort of scattered along the landscape spine. So tot lot, children's play areas, barbecue. You can see the children's play area off in the distance here. You can't really get a full picture of it with this slide, but it runs the full length of this of this.
We can see it pretty well on the screen.
You can? Oh,
Yeah.
good. Okay, great. This is a barbecue area.
Less
which,
well up here.
And I'm sorry
Right.
to do this to you, because I know you're trying to operate the computer, but your
I
mouth
too
keeps
far?
moving too far. Now, would you rather have a handheld mic so you can stand closer to the computer?
maybe I'll just move it this way.
Yeah, cool.
Does that work?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we can hear you here, but it may not
hard
be
to
going out
tra-
to the
right.
people that are, all those millions of people that are home watching us
That's
tonight.
right. That's right. I want to make sure that they can hear
Election night, right?
every word, every word.
Thanks.
Okay, so here's the a barbecue area. We have several of those scattered through the site, as well as children play areas. Here is a photo, which is not the most beautiful photo, I admit, but it is of a sport court. And this is not anything earth-shattering, but it works quite well. It's just a paved area. It's fenced. It has some striping for various sorts of games. And residents can go to the office and check out balls or equipment, nets, whatever they might need for a variety of sporting games. And it's something for older children to be engaged with. And we often focus on the younger kids and tot lots and play areas, but it's nice to have a place for the older kids to go as well. This development also has a pool and a spa and a community building, which we call the Cabana because it's located next to the pool. Inside we have a fitness room and a community room that residents use for gatherings, and also we have a what used to be a business center but has been converted to a computer lab because there was such a demand for that kind of service. There were so many children who could really take advantage of computer classes in a computer lab, and computers are available. This next development, we're increasing the density quite a
San
bit.
Francisco, that's Church Street, right?
That's right, exactly. So we went from 20 units an acre out in Milpitas to 93 units an acre in San Francisco, so a serious increase in density. This is 100% affordable, a lot of three-bedroom units. There are a lot of children who live here, close to 50 children here in this development. And it sort of dispels the myth that families won't live in high-density housing. There are a lot of families who live here in this development. One factor here is the larger units, the affordable rents, but also a lot of the common area amenities and services. Here is the courtyard, which is kind of a nice open courtyard with some meandering paths. You can't really see it, or maybe you can on your monitor, but there's a play area there that's shared by the resident children as well as the children that are enrolled in the on-site daycare center. And that is a really big feature, a really important feature. I'm a parent of a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I'm hypersensitive to this issue, but it's very hard to find good child care, and it's very hard to get into the good child care. Well, here, there's a child care center right on site with a priority for the residents, and that works really well. It also is open to the community, and it's been great in fostering great relationships with the community, and that's something that's really important to us.
Who operates the daycare?
There's a nonprofit provider that is not related to Bridge, but we are in contract with them. We went through a long process in selecting them and bringing them in, and they had a part in designing the center and the outdoor play area and getting the licensing as well.
Did Bridge or is Bridge subsidizing in any way the daycare center?
No. No, although we assisted in getting some funds for the center, but Bridge itself and the development itself is not subsidizing the center.
So the nonprofit's basically carrying that load on their own?
That's right. Again, we assisted in helping get the funds for, and we obviously provided the space
Right.
as well.
And they charge for their services?
They do, but it's, I'm not exactly sure what the prices are, but they're affordable prices for
Right.
the
And
residents.
it's a private nonprofit?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Exactly. There's a view of the inside of the daycare center. This was before the opening, and all the children's artwork is not quite yet up on the walls. It looks a little different now, a little more lived in, but you can see the very small chairs and tables. Also in this development, we have community areas available. There are a lot of classes that take place for the children and families. There's a nutritional cooking class and a theater class and computer classes. Here's someone working at the computer at the development. All right, this development is in Walnut Creek, not quite as dense as the last one. This is Coggins, and it's Coggins Square, and it's 40 units an acre. There are 87 units here, 116 parking places, and about 50 children. Here, this was developed in conjunction with market rate ownership development, and the outdoor areas are shared between the two developments. We've done this in a couple of projects, and it works very well. So there's a pool and a grassy open area and some barbecue space, and it's shared between the residents of both of the developments, and it provides an opportunity to provide a little more amenity than we may have otherwise been able to with just a straight affordable housing development. Talked a lot about rental, but here's an ownership example. This is 100% ownership. It's 100% affordable ownership. It was built a long time ago, preceded my time at Bridge. But this is Parkview Commons in San Francisco. It's 114 units. 72, I believe, units are three-bedroom units. A lot of families purchased units here. They were priced at 30 to 50% of the market at the time. It was a very good deal. And as Don Turner used to say, 114 families were lucky to get housing, and about 4,000 families went away kicking sand. So certainly a great need for this kind of housing. It's very difficult to do today. Here's another picture of that. And I'm not really going to highlight this one, but this is another one in San Jose. I will mention that a lot of developments that are 100% affordable, people are able to live and save money and then go on to buy housing elsewhere in the community, which is a nice way for people to move up. And what happens then is that more families move in with children, and so you just continue having a lot of children in the development. Sometimes if people stay for a long time, the children grow up and they're older and you don't have family housing anymore. But you know, if there are other opportunities, certainly if there are other opportunities to buy subsidized units, and I know Emeryville has done a lot of work in that regard, which is wonderful. So in general, I would say that if you can size units appropriately, build in amenities within the units and the development, and site them appropriately, you'll hopefully encourage families to come and live in the developments they build. I think that's it. I'll turn it back over to Amy.
Thanks. You've been beating a drum that I've been beating for a while, which is that if you plan it with the amenities for a project and plan it right, then it's not a problem to have, it draws families.
Yeah, Mira, can I have one question? Does Bridge manage all their apartments complexes? When they build them, do they manage them?
Yes. Most of the developments, there are a few developments where we contract with third-party management companies, just a few. They are specific in nature, but almost all of them are managed by our affiliate Bridge Property Management Company.
Thank you.
Thank you. My presentation isn't quite as glamorous, but it represents quite a bit of work on the part of the Housing Committee. We met in early October and hashed through some of these revisions, and it took quite some time to get to the point where we could make a recommendation on some language changes. To begin, I wanted to just go over some of the key terms of our current ordinance before getting into the unit designation process. The city's housing ordinance requires for projects of 30 or more units a 20% set aside at the moderate income level, and this applies to both rental and for sale projects. In ownership projects, the affordability period is 45 years, and in rental projects, it's 55 years. And the ordinance terms are effectuated through these individual affordability agreements that we negotiate between the city and the project owner. And in terms of the below market rate unit designation process, the affordability agreements that the city enters include exhibits that show the floor plans and the designated BMRs, a list of the unit and project amenities, and the pricing or rents that apply to the BMR units. Emeryville Warehouse was the first inclusionary project that we negotiated. That was done in 2000. Since that time, we've negotiated 18 agreements, Glass House Lofts being the most recent one, for a total of 323.
18 in 6 years.
18, yes, 18 projects.
Wow.
Right. So for 1,700 units that are either built or they're under construction at this point. or about to start construction, and 323 of those units are below market rate units. And I think I'm on the wrong slide. This is my first PowerPoint, so let me go to the previous one.
But if you hadn't said anything, we probably wouldn't have noticed.
You would have. Since the adoption of some of our earlier agreements, such as the terraces or 1500 Park, the city has improved its position with respect to negotiating these agreements and designating the BMRs. In those earlier cases, the BMRs might have tended to be on the smaller size and not represented the overall project mix. We've had mixed results on the kind of twin goals in the ordinance of geographic distribution of the units and the BMR units needing to be proportional to the mix of units in the project as a whole. For example, in your packet there's the 1401 Park project, which we negotiated last year. We have a mix of units that represents the project overall, but the top floor of that project does not have any BMR units. And I think the developer made the reasonable case that those were kind of premium view units, and that's where they were going to be making the sales revenue to help offset the impacts of the inclusionary ordinance. Two sections of the ordinance, and this was the part we worked through at the Housing Committee, address the city's goals for the designation and geographical distribution and amenity levels of the BMR units. Section 9.9-4, 62.3, and then 62.10. The general requirements section, which is 62.3, is somewhat misleading in what is expected for the geographical distribution of the units and proportionality question, in that it has language about reasonable distribution and then concludes with a sentence that the units need to be directly proportionate. So that's one issue with that. On the subject of amenities, it's a bit more straightforward, although it doesn't address project amenities. It really deals with the unit amenities need to be identical. The language, if you'll bear with me on that, is unless the city finds compelling reasons to the contrary, the set-aside units shall be reasonably dispersed throughout the development where feasible. The mix and type of unit shall be reasonably proportionate to those of the project as a whole and shall be comparable with the design of the market rate units in terms of appearance, materials, and finished quality. And the written agreement, which is our affordability agreement, needs to include a breakdown of the units, which shall be directly proportionate.
Amy, can I interrupt here? In the case of the terraces where we found that the below market rate units were not built the same as the others and where a considerable number of those units are suffering problems because they can't even be occupied, what is the city's leverage in that area where these problems exist?
In terms of the terraces project directly, I guess I would ask our city attorney on how we need to handle some of the individuals who have not been able to be in their units. Do you feel like...
I'm not sure that's what Councilmember Bukowski's question was.
Well, I'm saying that we have units. We have a project where the below market rate units were not constructed the same as the other units. Both Councilmember Cassis and I went on a tour, and that's something that we witnessed.
And that is allowed by your present
We
ordinance.
have something in here about amenity levels, which is one of the issues that those unit owners had.
Right. Okay.
So there's language that the Housing Committee looked at that Amy's going to get to about how to deal with that amenity level.
Okay, and then where the units can't be occupied, is there some measure of relief that can be provided, or is that not?
No.
No? All right.
Well, as long as, would you prefer to finish before we ask questions, or ask
could-
questions
Well,
as we
I-
go?
Finish the presentation and then ask
Sure.
questions.
Okay.
Oh, no, I was going to ask one. I'll wait. Yeah.
I did want to say on this section 6210, it's about the ability to reduce the amenity in square footages, and this has been used much less frequently because it requires a demonstration on the part of the developer of economic hardship, and the way we analyze that is that we obtain their pro formas if they're willing to share that, which often they're not willing to do. The Housing Committee on this second section is not recommending any changes to that section. It does allow this economic hardship clause to stay in place. The Housing Committee is recommending the first section to be revised to make more clear the goals of the city, that BMR units be geographically distributed and proportional to the project mix as a whole. The committee felt it was important to convey that it's not the city's expectation that units such as premium units or penthouse units be designated as below market rate housing. Also, because developers often offer upgrades, and we can't add the cost of that onto the price of the BMR units, the committee felt it was important to stipulate in the ordinance that the below market rate and market rate units have equal amenities pre-upgrade. So, for example, it would be okay for a market rate purchaser to upgrade to hardwood flooring from carpeting, as long as that carpeting is provided throughout the project, both the BMR units and the market rate units. Finally, parking is not now specifically addressed in the ordinance, and we wanted to make sure that it was stated somewhere in the ordinance that parking was equally provided to both below market rate households and market rate households. So kind of a concern about having an equitable distribution. The language of this ordinance that the Housing Committee is recommending, I'm sorry I wasn't able to strike out reasonably, but if I could read this, we're deleting the where feasible and reasonably language, and then we're adding some language. So unless the city finds compelling reasons to the contrary, the set-aside units shall be dispersed throughout the development. The mix and type of units shall be proportionate to those of the project as a whole, with the exception that premium units, example penthouses or top floor view units, shall not be required to be set-aside units and shall be comparable with the design of the base level market rate units prior to upgrades in terms of appearance, materials, and finished quality. Parking designated for the set-aside units shall be provided in an equitable manner, as that provided for the market rate units.
I would like to offer a slight wording change.
But I thought we were going to save our comments to the end.
Oh,
Or we could add that in the, because that is one of the actions that we're asking the council to consider.
Right.
Is text, the approval of this, or we could have some, if you have substitute language.
well, it's clarified that the prior to upgrade that you've underlined there, I would just like to clarify that it's prior to optional upgrades by the purchaser.
Yeah, I had the same thing. I called it.
That's all.
That's the intent.
I called
yeah.
it purchaser funded.
Yeah,
Prior to purchaser funded upgrades. I was going to
Right.
suggest that.
right, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
With reference to the parking, this could be a very controversial thing, but if the occupant of a BMR unit doesn't have a car, could the cost of that unit be reduced to reflect the fact that they're not going to have a parking space? I mean, is that something that would be appropriate to include here?
I think it should be included for all the units, and so I would happily,
On the same basis that any of the thing.
I would happily
I mean,
suggest
the
it
whole
for-
point is that we don't want to repeat of what happened at the terraces, where their parking spaces are outside of some additional security.
Right.
And so what this language says that it's got to be equitable as that provided for the market rate units. So if that would include lessening the price for for not getting one or something, as long as The main thing is not to have it be different than the market rate.
Right, okay.
That's all.
Right.
Next section is just to briefly address 3 revisions that the city attorney's office has recommended for the ordinance. The first is to change the ordinance definitions of affordable housing costs to be consistent with the state health and safety code definitions, which are shown in the box on the screen. The percentages shown in this table are indicating the maximum that a household can spend on either rental or ownership housing to have it qualify as affordable. And we are actually using these definitions when we establish pricing on the units or the rents, and when we do our annual chart showing what the sales prices are based on the Alameda County median incomes.
Now, why not just say in this section that it should be consistent with the state health and safety code, rather than be explicit so that when the state law changes, we got to come back and change this?
Yeah, well, we're not presenting you the actual revisions to the ordinance tonight. I mean, I think we would be coming back after the direction tonight with the actual ordinance, and we could talk about how that is worded.
And we should do that in
just
all instances, because the state laws change so often that our ordinances are often lacking. So, okay.
The second change is to add language to the ordinance to stipulate that projects converting from rental to condominiums comply with our ordinance regardless of when they were originally constructed. And we actually adopted the city adopted a condo conversion ordinance earlier this year, and it would just be making this consistent with the language that's in that at this point. Finally, it's necessary for us to add a properly drafted waiver provision to the ordinance that allows a developer to be waived from the inclusionary requirement if there is not a reasonable relationship between the project impact and the inclusionary requirement. And this language will strengthen our ordinance, basically. Okay, moving into the discussion of the potential revision of the ordinance, income level mandates from the 20% set aside at moderate to 15% with 5% very low income, 5% low, and 5% moderate income. The Housing Committee, as I mentioned, has discussed this topic, and they had recommended that the ordinance not be changed. But back in April, when the council discussed this, they requested, you requested further analysis of it. In reviewing what different mix of income levels could be achieved in the city's ordinance, staff focused on what level could be considered cost neutral to project developers from what the current ordinance requires. And in our analysis of a hypothetical project, the 15% set aside would be feasible with a mix of the 5-5-5. It's valuable as we look at this to consider the housing production implications of the revision as the city embarks in the next couple of years on both an update to our housing element, as well as we'll be next year in the middle of the year updating the 10-year housing compliance plan, which is an agency requirement. Under California Community Redevelopment Law, the agencies must ensure that 15% of the overall housing produced in the project areas are produced for very low and moderate income households. And within that percentage, 9% are for low or moderate, and 6% for very low. As shown in the slide, over the period of our 10-year compliance plan, which is 2005 through 2014, we're showing, at least at this point, what we know, 2,900 units that would be constructed, of which 392 low-moderate units are projected, which when we're needing to track whether that's a surplus or deficit from our past period, it's a 127 unit surplus, and 176 very low-income units, although that results in a 17-unit deficit that we must make up. These are not goals, these are actual requirements. These numbers are based on the current ordinance, the 20% set aside at moderate income.
What happens if we don't make up the deficit?
Well,
Well, it's a requirement of the redevelopment law, and I'll let Michael talk about what people can do in order to force you, but in other communities where they haven't been complying with their housing requirements, there's been lawsuits filed by housing advocates to compel the agency to produce the housing.
okay. So looking at the same period, if I ran the projected units against this 5%, 555 mix, and the city continues to have a surplus of low mod units, but we would substantially reduce the number of, or the deficit on the very low income side, which could be, I'm sure we could find certainly projects that those 3 units could be made up in. Staff is also tracking how we're doing with our ABAG regional housing fair share allocation goals for purposes of our housing element planning. And it's expected we'll have updated numbers in the next couple months, and we will.
I got them in my mail today.
Yeah, so what I'm presenting tonight does not reflect those numbers, because we do want to roll that out to have a discussion with both the Housing Committee and the Council about those numbers, because they are, it's a significant jump from our current period of 1999 through 2006. If the ordinance is kept, so what I did with this was I used our 99 through 06 numbers, but I projected out the projects that we expect to pull permits for through mid-2008, which is when we're supposed to have our final numbers. So using that period, we would meet 78% of our very low income goal, 83% of the low income goal, and 121% of the moderate income goal. In revising the ordinance, it would improve things. The city would meet 82% of the very low income goal, 92% of the low income, and 111% of the moderate income goal. We're way over the top on the overall goal. So as the council is considering whether to look at revising the ordinance to this new mix, you may want to think about some of the policy issues with it. The change would certainly assist us in meeting our agency housing production requirements and getting farther along on the ABAG goals. The analysis that I conducted was meant to show at what levels this change would be cost neutral. It was a hypothetical project. Developers might argue that, for their project type, for their construction type, for the unit mix, they'd come up with something different. That might end up forcing some more, during the negotiation period, more of this kind of review of pro formas and economic feasibility analysis, which we haven't had to do too much of. Developers have been coming in and they comply with our ordinance. Finally, there may be some marketing implications to it. I'm not on the ownership for sale side. The very low income target may present to some developers some hurdle in their mind on how to do that marketing. To wrap up, finally. We are asking for the council to give some direction on making these revisions to the ordinance. The first is the section general requirements, the text that I read you that was revised. The second is the reduction in square footage and amenity section to have that remain in place. Action on the 3 City Attorney Office recommended revisions, and then finally how you want to proceed on revising the ordinance to the 15% 555 plan. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Any questions to Amy?
And I also want to remind you that if you have questions for Ann as well.
Okay, thanks.
Ask her.
Mayor Atkin, I just have a few comments to make. Amy was quite correct in saying that the Housing Committee spent a lot of time going through these issues, and I hope the council takes very seriously their recommendations, because we did spend a lot of time, and there was quite vigorous debate back and forth. I'd like to address, and I thank all those members of the Housing Committee and Amy for the time that they spent and the care and consideration they gave to this housing issue. I have some concerns about our projections moving forward to 2011-12. We have just come through a significant housing boom. I believe that there's, as you know, most other people believe, there's going to be a softening of the market, a different approach from the developers, and so I would like to address under the recommendations that Amy is bringing forward, the number 4, that rather than making a decision tonight or giving a direction tonight, that we instruct the staff to bring together a meeting of those developers to get some feedback from them as to what their considerations are on this, given that we have this underlying goal of providing affordable housing in the city of Emeryville. We are somewhat partners with the developers. We should get a substantial amount of input from them as to their considerations to what's being proposed here. So I'm asking the council to delay any action on this until we can set up that kind of a meeting.
Mayor, if I might?
Yeah.
I'm okay with delaying, but I think rather than just having staff have the roundtable discussion, I'd like that to be, you know, perhaps a separate meeting that's just a study session with us there. Because I know when, you know, Charlie's brought all these people and Diana brought all these people into this, to the general plan committee, it's really it's really educational when everybody sits at the table and talks about, like we did on the parking issue and the cost of parking and so forth. And so I'd like to gain that information and not have just staff gain it and then regurgitate it back to us.
I support that, Dick.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'd like to ask, and Amy, you put a tremendous amount of work into this report, and I appreciate it greatly. What would help me, and I started to do this myself, and then I kind of got lost, is there a way to take this information and get it on a chart so that we could look, for example, and say, here's the ABAG goals, here's the, you know, the regional housing goals, here's where we would be under the 20%, here's where we'd be under 555.
Yeah.
So that we could compare the numbers side by side going right down the page. If that's not, is that a huge task? It's hard for I mean, I really wasn't having much success
It wouldn't be
doing
a hard task, but I think it could be folded into the...
Are you talking about that
The,
grid on a project-by-project basis? Like if this project was just at 20% or if this project were at 555?
Well, just kind of looking at this analysis that, you know, that's in here and taking it forward. I mean, any way that it can be presented that would be easier to compare the numbers. Because I will tell you, even though I appreciate how much work went into this and how well written it is, I got lost in here. And I mean, it's a lot of
big report,
information.
yeah.
And so I'm just trying to figure out some way to make it a little more user-friendly. And maybe it is easier to do it on a project-by-project basis than an overall look. But we're trying to look at this and say, well, here's the experience we've had. If we'd had a 5, 5, and 5, isn't that what you're kind of doing here? Here's where we'd be, or
It is, but we are getting these new numbers for the 2006
Right.
through 13
Right.
period for
And they should go in
ABAG, and
there.
so that this information could be put onto
Right.
one page with all
Right.
that, and so it would be
Yeah.
a somewhat different analysis on the
Right.
ABAG side, but that it would be fresh.
Sure.
And
This 555 does not relate to any other legal provision, right? It's not, it doesn't correspond to the requirements of redevelopment.
no, well, the 15% does, but you would
not the
change it.
555.
You would change the very low to 6%, and then the remaining 9% would be low and moderate.
Mayor Atkin, a thought has come to my mind that you just got the new numbers from ABAG. I would very much like to have a representative of ABAG come to this council and explain to us what their rationale is for providing these numbers to jurisdiction, where the city of Emeryville is in the 9-county Bay Area in terms of in our past production and where we fit, and what happens to those jurisdictions that absolutely are not participating in this at all. They get the ABAG numbers, but they really do very little with them. You know, we look to the east, we can see that right close over the hills.
Well,
Would everybody else like to hear from ABAG?
I think that's fine, but I also think it would be helpful, again, I don't know why I've all of a sudden gotten into charts, but it would be good for us to put forth, what our goals have been over the last 10 years or whatever period's easy to do, and what we've made. And I think there are some comparative numbers out there for other cities. But I remember a presentation at the mayor's conference down in Fremont a few years ago where we just gotten our new numbers, and they were ridiculously high. And it seemed that ABAG was sort of admitting at that meeting that the more you build, the more they expect you to build.
Well,
Right.
let's get some
it's like you get
accountability here from
punished
ABAG.
yeah.
Does everybody support that?
Yeah, but
having them
let's
come
look
here?
at the numbers.
I'm not sure what
Let's
that's
get.
going to accomplish, actually, but
But is it okay too if we pull the information? So here's the again on a sheet of paper. Here's the Emeryville story. I mean, here's what the goals have been, and here's what we've achieved. But they keep going with the numbers, and pretty soon we're going to have to build some more land somewhere, or have nothing but high rises in town to meet these goals. It's getting ludicrous. I agree with you, Nora.
My goal is to provide as much affordable housing as possible, so I'm not...
As much what?
Affordable housing as possible, so I'm not sure the purpose of bringing ABAG in will just beat them up. It's,
Well, the problem is, we all agree with that, and that's what we've been working on for a long time here. But when they give you goals that are just ridiculous, regardless of how, I believe we've done a better job in that regard than just about any of our neighbors. And we get rewarded for that by getting higher goals again the next time around. And that doesn't seem right to me. And
if
so
you
I don't, if there's going to
But
be
there's no-
sanctions for not meeting.
but there's no sanction, there's no...
no.
Well, no, but
reward, so
that was,
what-
No, there isn't.
but that was the thing that they're building more into the law, and they warned us about that. And I don't know what's happened with that. That they in fact were building more sanctions into it of monies that would be withheld from the feds and the state if you didn't meet your goals. Now maybe that's all gone away because everybody was certainly worried about it. But I just wonder how much affordable housing Piedmont has built in the last 10 years.
Well,
To the extent there's
If
any...
you extrapolate ABAG's goals, in the year 2050, Emeryville would have a skyline of Pacific Park Plaza.
Right, exactly, that's
That's
what I'm
the
saying.
way you meet those kind of goals.
Yeah.
We've got to get a handle on what's the rationale here, how close is it to the reality of the housing industry. I don't see it as an opportunity to beat ABAG up. I would like to get some real hard answers from these people.
And I think what I remember from that presentation, and we could sort of anticipate that anyway, they've got their projections for what the population of the Bay Area is going to be in 2050.
That's right.
And then they say we don't want to keep encouraging suburban sprawl. We want to have urban infill, and therefore to absorb all these people, we have this amount of space, and here's your share of those new people.
30-story towers.
Well, my
The
understanding
ABAG
is that
requirements.
they look at the city general plans, and they see how much land is owned for residential, and then that's how they make their determination. So if you have a site like AC Transit, which never redevelops, but it's designated as housing, they consider that to be a housing site, and therefore you would expect that in a projection.
So getting back to these bullet points of Amy's,
What page are you on?
Page 10 of 11, I would propose that the city council accept the work of the housing committee and direct staff to move forward on items 1, 2, and 3.
I'll second that if we have that word change, purchaser funded.
Right.
right.
And also, I just, before we get to a vote or if there's more discussion, I just want to make sure that I understand what we mean, because 1 and 2 are kind of the same. What do we mean by the word proportionate? I mean, what is the meaning of that within the context of our ordinance?
It means that if you have a project with a mix of, say, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, like 40, 20, and 40,
Right.
that and then you figure out how many BMR units you have, then the mix of BMR units has to equal that
The project mix.
that overall
Okay.
mix.
And that's what I assumed it was. Is that defined any place in this ordinance, what we mean by proportional? Or is it
Yeah.
obvious? Is it self-defining?
No, it's
and
in there.
we don't, well, where is the word proportional defined?
I don't believe it is. It's not defined.
Oh.
I would just suggest that might be something we ought to do. You know? Unless everybody thinks it's obvious.
Well,
Proportional is proportional.
The one issue that came up was, okay, we get a proportional mix of unit type, but that might not be geographically proportional. And so we had this like stacking problem at the terraces, right? Where maybe the floor plans were kind of proportional, but they weren't geographically spread around. So, and you mentioned in your report the trade-off between those two things. So,
What's geographically proportional? What does that mean?
spread out around, not, so the BMRs aren't all
Within the
clustered.
project? Within the project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, geographically dispersed.
Okay.
So, you know, I guess there's just one issue there. If, you know, are we looking at unit type? Is that our number one ranking, and then our secondary ranking is geographically dispersed? So we avoid this stacking problem?
It's the way it's written now, it doesn't prioritize those two goals.
They're not mutually exclusive.
No.
No, but I guess the question is that what's a greater value? And do we put that into the ordinance? Is it a greater value to get a mixture of unit types? And I would argue that it is.
Than to have them spread out in a...
Spread out within the complex. To get the variety of unit types, I think, is more important.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing you're trying to avoid with spreading out is to not end up having an area stigmatized in some way. You know,
Right.
this is where the, quote, poor people live.
Right.
You know, or some designation
Right,
like
you don't want to
that.
get them all clustered
Yeah.
together.
So, but there's also building, you know, things that happen, and so I understand how some of that occurs. So you're right. There are some trade-offs there.
Well, the intent is clear here. I think you have to have a little flexibility to negotiate. All of these developments have different aspects to them. I think the way it's written, it has flexibility.
Can I just ask City Attorney Mike, are you concerned about the word proportional at all, or do you think it's...
I just had a different issue that I wanted to touch
Okay, so
on.
then nobody else is worried about it. I'll just forget about it.
What's your issue, Mike?
My issue really relates to item 2 about the notion of totally eliminating the idea of being able to reduce the amenity or square footage in a BMR unit as it relates to the other item that's in item 3, which is some of our concern about making sure we have an adequate sort of waiver provision in the ordinance, where if a developer comes forward and is arguing for a reduction in the number of units for various legal or technical arguments they may make, you may not want to foreclose your ability to say, okay, you know what, rather than just reducing the number of units down to 10%, we'd like to keep, you know, that same 20% figure, whatever the numbers are that you end up with, but recognizing your arguments will allow you to reduce the amenity level in those BMR units so that they're able to make up that financial hit that they're claiming, and obviously they're providing some proof to you that it exists. So what I'm suggesting is that while you may eliminate that section that specifically provides for it, when you talk in terms of adding language for some sort of waiver provision, I think we'll want to add some language in there that leaves open the option that in the context of looking at a waiver, that you could entertain a reduction in the amenity level and to effectuate that appeal.
I need to ask a question here, and this is purely educational. When we have below market rate units, the city provides a subsidy to the developer to make up the difference between the cost of the market rate and the below market rate. Is that right?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Sometimes you have authorized agreements for us to buy down, say, a moderate income units down to low income, and then in those situations we've provided the financial assistance. I believe it's directly to the homeowner, if I'm not mistaken. Sometimes it is to essentially buy down that moderate down to a low or a very low.
Okay. All right.
I just wanted to clarify that that's section 6210, the Housing Committee recommended that stay in the ordinance.
Okay, I wasn't sure where the council was going
Yeah,
on that.
I'll just say I don't think that I want to have flexibility to reduce the amenities. I mean, after seeing the terraces,
I don't think so.
I just
No
I
flexibility.
So
mean,
you'd
if you talk
rather-
about stigmatization.
You'd rather have, in the event somebody was making a cogent argument that they should have a reduction, you'd rather have fewer units. Obviously, same across the board units as the market rate units, as opposed to saying, well, okay, we'll keep the same number of units, but we'll allow you to reduce the amenity.
In fact, I think penalties should be imposed when they do that, really.
No, but I mean, I understand the question you're
Yeah.
asking.
So it's really sort of a
Do you want more housing units, or do you want
right.
a rigid structure here that you cannot absolutely reduce amenities?
We want people to be treated the
Our
same.
goal
is what we
here is
want.
trying to get affordable housing units for low and very low-income people.
I think the goal is we want people to be treated the same. That's the goal.
I mean, I think that the way we could structure it is that would be something you could consider in the context of an appeal, so that it's not sort of our standard practice that we're going to allow for that. But in the event somebody's able to put forth evidence and they come before the council with an appeal that says, we should be able to reduce the number of units, we could write it such that, okay, well, instead of that, we would rather entertain a reduction in amenity level. So that's something for you to consider.
I think that's a bad idea, because what that means is that you have a great deal of knowledge in constructing the project. The contractors, everyone who's working on it, they know which units are going to be the below market rate, because those are going to get less of a finish. And so I would worry that even in the construction phase, they would be shortchanged. Those units would be shortchanged. So I think that Ken is right. Dick, you're right.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, just in the terraces, for example, the ceilings. I mean, in the below market rate units, the ceilings weren't finished.
Right.
And it just, when you walked into the units, it was two of them side by side, below market not, same unit, same floor plan. Ceilings finished in one, whatever that concrete or that stuff is, that's what you're looking at in the other. I mean, I don't know, there's a real difference there.
Right.
So I guess
We want to avoid that
I guess my
happening.
answer is the same as Ken's, is I guess I would go for less units than really having people coming into something where they're always going to be clearly identified as being in those
Right.
less enjoyable units.
Especially when they turn over.
The whole
Subsequent
idea is to make everybody the same. That's the whole idea of having them mixed and everything. We're trying to make them all the
Inclusionary
same.
zoning.
It's discrimination when you're going to do one less than the other one, especially when you're supposed to do them all the same.
Yeah, I agree with that. Want to see the amenities.
I also question what the value is of not going with the 5, 5, and 5. I mean, the goal is to have a broad range of affordable units, and these are percentages, and each project I assume, can seek to deviate from that, just as each project can deviate from the current 20%. But the problem I see with the current 20% for moderate, or the current 20% for below market rate, is that the developer has an incentive to have those all moderate. And that clearly is not our goal. We would like, I think it's fair to say that we would like to have very low and low as well as moderate. And so I think that that should be the goal. And the staff report says that the 5, 5, and 5 is fiscally neutral. So what input do we get from the developer? The developer, I suppose, could refute that it's fiscally neutral. They could say, no, it's not fiscally neutral. But the problem is that if I have to decide between input from the developer who's biased and input from the staff who's looked at it, I would go with the staff because they're the experts and they're not biased. And so it seems quite logical to go with the 5, 5, and 5. So I don't see why we hold off on that.
The clarification that I would seek is the very low and low percentages are a little different under redevelopment law than it is under the ABAG fair share goal, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the redevelopment law just says 6% at very low, but that they don't say how much should be low?
They don't. It's low or mod. The 6% is very low, and then 9% needs to be low or mod. But ABAG breaks it down by the different income groups, and you'll find that what they are, what they want for their overall, they'll give an overall number, and the amount, the percentage of very low, low, and mod is much beyond the 15% that is required.
We've produced disproportionately too many moderate units in the last 6 years. So
that's right.
It's reflecting the ordinance.
It's
disproportionate.
Disproportionate. It's
To the other
it's good that
levels.
we're providing. Yeah, exactly. We're shortchanging the others,
Yeah.
which it's great that we're providing the moderate. That's it's great.
Right,
but-
because clearly there's even more of a need for more moderate than there are, buyers, but, there's more buyers than there are units available at that level, but we're not proportionally meeting our other levels.
Now the one thing that is part of the discussion is, in the past we've heard about, well, should the goal be to get those that qualify for very low into ownership housing, or should there be more emphasis on rental? And what I've heard from my colleagues in the past, and what I agree with, is that we think that ownership housing, owner-occupied housing, is the best, and it's true for the at market rate housing, and it's true for affordable housing. I think that's right, and so that's why I think we should go with the 5, 5, and 5. If we think that very low for ownership is not the way to go, then you can somewhat justify shortchanging very low for ownership, but I just don't think we should go there. I think we should try the 5, 5, and 5.
I may well end up agreeing with you, John, and I said that when you brought that idea up for the first time, but I would like to get the input from the community just because it helps broaden. This is a big change, and I'd like to, I'd like to feel like I've looked at all sides of it before I do that, but I'm probably going to end up being there.
Yeah. I'd like to hear from the community of the builders and the developers, too.
It doesn't have to take all night.
Not only because, we're all in this together, but clearly they may have their hand on the pulse of what is actually happening right now in the housing market, and what we may be discussing here may indeed be an academic exercise in terms of housing in the next 10 years.
And the other thing is, we had that bubble before where it was all office buildings, and then, the dot-com bust happened, and then people mid-stage converted places that are going to be offices to housing units, and we're looking at the reverse of that trend right now. So I think the main thing I want to find out from people is, by doing this, recognizing the fact that we're going to be looking at a tighter housing market, are we doing something that's going to just further discourage housing development
Exactly.
beyond what's happening just by virtue of the economy? And that's the knowledge I want to gain and feel comfortable with, that I don't feel like I have right now. And again, I'd like to be able to analyze these numbers side by side.
Well, it looks like under point 1, you have an okay to proceed with the revision there.
Well, Nora made a motion for 1, 2, and 3,
Right.
and I seconded that.
You see,
Okay.
all we're doing here is giving the staff direction to pull this together and bring it back to us. This is not the be-all and end-all. It'll come back to us, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
All
okay.
right, well,
And
I'll
we
s-
will have more knowledge by that time.
I'll support 1, 2, and 3 also. Anybody want to, Ken or John, you're against 1, 2?
No, I'm not against 1, 2, and 3. I would just
Okay,
make a
cool.
similar motion after we're done with that for 4.
Okay, I think we should hold off just for this meeting. You want to hold off, right,
Yeah, on 4.
on 4?
Right. And get this input, but soon. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a feeling these folks can kind of
You
come
wanna
in and
hold
talk to
off,
us.
and
I want to have a meeting
I want to
here.
hear from the
Right.
housing builders.
And what's that, 3-2?
Yeah, yes.
What do you say,
Or does
Ken? You want to hear from the builders, or you don't care?
No, I want to hear from Bill.
All right,
Okay.
4-1. Let's go.
All right. So there's no questions for, you're Ann, right? Yeah, about bridge or anything, huh? Okay. Thank you both.
Our best regards to Carol Galante.
I'll adjourn the special meeting, and thank you for your patience, and we're ready to start the regular redevelopment agency meetings. I'll call it to order, and please call the roll.
Agency Member Bukowski.
Here.
Agency Member Davis. Here. Agency Member Fricky.
Here.
Vice Chair Cassis.
Here.
Chair Atkin.
Here, please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no special orders of the day. Are there any citizens to be heard? Joshua?
7 minutes left to vote, folks.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to going back home and hearing the returns.
We might have some hope tonight, huh?
Yes, yes. I think this will be a good night. And I wanted to just come and thank you for Saturday, about 10 days ago, for the CIP meeting, which I think was also a very good meeting. My name is Joshua Simon. I'm Vice President of the School Board, and I'm really was very heartened by the good work that the council did 10 days ago on the 5-year capital improvement program. Many of the community members that came and speak talked about the opportunity to have both community facilities and transportation and amenities that really serve quality of life throughout. As a school board member, I'm just delighted by the opportunity that we have one of these rare, once-in-a-generation moments when our school facilities need to be replaced, and we have community facilities that need to be replaced, and we have this great opportunity that the money that the school will be spending for new facilities and the capital improvement money that we have for the city can come together in a facility that serves the education, recreation, and community health needs of the whole community. So I'm really excited about the ISAC committee beginning to meet, and would like to encourage anyone listening tonight and our audience members to go to www.emerycenter.org and either take out an application for the ISAC committee and to join us in shaping this facility. It's a tremendous opportunity. I'm hoping that Prop 1D passes tonight, which would also help. And again, thank you for your good work.
Thanks, Joshua. Any other citizens to be heard?
Josh, did you get the memo I sent you earlier?
What's that?
Did you get the email I sent you earlier today?
I haven't been home. I was at work all day today.
Okay,
But,
okay. I thought that's what you were here for, so.
Oh,
But okay.
sorry, I'll,
When you go home, you may come back after you read it.
okay.
Mayor, if I could, and before you leave, Josh, I know you and I have had some discussions, and, you know, and it goes back to a point you made a minute ago, John, and kind of a follow-up on the study session we just had. It is your belief, I think, isn't it, that part of a goal, if part of our goal is to draw families with children to Emeryville, that we ought not to be so hung up on ownership and that we ought to look more to rentals. Is that a fair?
Well, I think rental housing, not only for the school, but for the community of people who work in Emeryville, I think having housing that serves people that make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year is good policy, and I think it provides an opportunity, particularly for families, to be able to save up money to become homeowners. I think there are actually new opportunities in affordable rental housing, new tools that can be employed to help renters become owners and to save up to be owners. So I do think it's a great opportunity.
This isn't the time to have that discussion. We've
Right.
had this
But
discussion.
I look forward to
Right.
coming back for your
Let's have that
special
discussion
meeting.
another time.
Right, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I just,
Thank you.
since we just did that, you were here, I thought it would be good
Yes.
to tie it together.
No,
Thank you.
very much. That's right.
All right. Is there a motion on the consent
Move the
calendar?
consent calendar.
I'd like to remove item D.
Second.
Okay, without exception, the action recaps are passed. D, Dick?
Yeah, I don't disagree with this idea. I guess I'm just concerned about, given the struggle that we had, where this extra money comes from.
Well, this comes from the 80% monies of the redevelopment agency. So it's not the affordable housing monies, and it does potentially compete somewhat with resources that you could use for the capital improvement program.
Yeah.
But that's why the committee put a limit of $20,000 on the recommendation. That was from the Community Preservation Committee. So,
Right.
you know, $60,000 if you know, that was your total obligation in a particular fiscal year, probably wouldn't have a lot of impact on your CIP discussion.
Right. But I mean, part of why I'm raising this is because it certainly, given the fact that we do have a lot of, you know, these kinds of communities in Emeryville, is we're opening the door. And I could just say, for example, at Watergate, I mean, last winter they had a section of that stucco fence blow down, and they're going to be refencing the whole Powell Street side. So the same arguments that are being made here for Emery Bay could be made for Watergate. And is that a path that we really want to go down? I mean, you know, because if it's good for them and the neighborhood, why isn't it going to be good at Watergate to help them finance?
They're not in the redevelopment
Emery Bay
area.
Village is a low-income project, if that makes any
They're
difference.
not in a redevelopment area.
Ah.
But we
And
did
there you
have
have
that
it.
size. We did have that size of project in mind, though, when we discussed the cap.
Okay.
For that very reason.
Yeah.
Didn't think about the redevelopment difference.
And,
Okay.
before we move along on this, I just want to give some real credit to Patrick and his Community Preservation Task Force, because this is where this idea developed. Mainly, it was addressing, you know, it grew out of the take back the concrete in the front yards thing, but also an attempt to get rid of the chain link fences in Emeryville, which certainly dragged down the look of the community. So it's an effort that has been very successful, just, you know, goes along very quietly, but we're replacing those chain link fences, and you can see the difference.
Okay,
I'd move approval.
Second.
For Mike or Carol, I guess I just have a quick question for you. I'm no longer a homeowner in that particular project, but because I had a history, do I have a conflict of interest?
No, you have no financial interest in that.
Okay, great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. No public hearings, no policy items, no admin items. Thank you for making this agenda light on election night. Communications and reports, department heads?
Mayor Atkin,
Yeah.
maybe I'll say it now before it gets too late. I just want to take this opportunity one last time to remind the council and the public about the upcoming community workshop for the general plan update. This is a workshop where the public will have an opportunity to review the future development scenarios that have been developed by the General Plan Update Steering Committee. It should be a very important and interesting workshop. It will be held not this coming Saturday, but the next Saturday, November 18th, from 10 a.m. to 12:30 at the Linden Life Gallery, right down the street, 1375 Park Avenue. And to further alert everybody about this workshop, we have mailed a postcard out that I think that went out today, should be arriving shortly, and to every resident and business in the city, and that will be followed by a newsletter which is being mailed in the next day or two and should arrive in mailboxes the end of the week. And the council, of course, will all receive copies of that as well. We'll also be going to put posters around town, and we're going to be putting notices on the various E-trees in the city, so hopefully we'll be able to canvass the community and get as many people out to this workshop as possible, and we look forward to seeing you all there.
Any other department heads? Agency members?
Yeah, Mayor Atkin, I'm going to take this opportunity to report on 2 meetings. I should be doing this at the end of the council meeting, but because both of these meetings address an issue that's very important to everybody, not only in this city, but the state and the nation, and this is the issue of the global warming and the efforts that we are taking at a local level, since the federal level doesn't seem to be able to get in gear to do it. But the first meeting was the Alameda County Climate Protection Project, and I just want to report on that almost all the cities in Alameda County, plus the county itself, are coming together and exchanging information not only about the projects they already have in the works for climate control, but sharing information and establishing a database so that we can measure how we're reducing these emissions into the atmosphere. I want to give a lot of credit to Peter Schultze-Allen. He is so dedicated, and he really spends a lot of time developing these particular issues. I think the solar panels on the City Hall is one example of his work.
You know, along those lines, I attended the ABAG annual meeting, and they had an extensive presentation about global warming, some very excellent speakers that were there.
That was the next meeting that I wanted to address, and maybe you want to tag on to that, Ken. This is something that we have to begin doing at the local level because we just have run out of time. We did have good speakers at the ABAG meeting, and although the city of Emeryville has already moved forward on many steps, we learned some good ideas there that we can latch on to.
Did you see that gal with the ponytail?
Yeah.
That was excellent.
Very good. That's all I have.
Okay.
Do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Agency meetings adjourned, and I'll open up the regular meeting of the City Council. Please note we're all still here. There's no special orders of the day. Any citizens to be heard? Okay, city. We should write now interim city manager's report. I guess would be more accurate here.
I have one quick item to suggest to the council. In your rules of procedure, it calls for the election of the mayor and vice mayor at the second meeting in November, so that would normally be on the 21st of this month. But as you know, Councilmember Cassis announced at the last meeting that he would be absent on the 21st, so I would like to suggest that we hold over that discussion until December 5th.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
That's it.
Thanks. Okay. Who wants to pull what on the consent calendar?
Item J. I'd move the rest unless there's...
Second.
Just a second. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Without exception, the rest of the consent calendar. Dick?
Yeah, on item J, this deals with the rails, the use of the old rails to try to spiff up the greenway there section. And I understand the problems that they've come up with. I guess what I would ask, because they've got some good designers there, can they take a look at the potential use of those in some other way? For example, we've got those benches, that are going to be there, that are going to be horizontal, and maybe they could front, if they can do it in a way that people don't cut themselves. But having the connection to the rail history is a nice thought. And if we could do that by fronting the benches with the rails, as you look at that from the street, I think that to me is a way that we might be able to incorporate them, but it may not be practical. So if they could just take a look at that and see if there's some other way they could use it.
Well, I agree. I think the rails are an important part of our history, and that we have thought of the idea of incorporating it into benches or something in the park that would identify it, and we might even have a plaque or something to indicate that.
Or planters even. I mean, maybe they could be cut up smaller, made into planters. Let's just look at that. So I just wanted to throw that as an idea.
Sure.
And with that, I would move item J.
Second.
Okay, without exception. We have a public hearing tonight. This is the introduction and first reading. Well, actually, I guess I'll entertain a motion to read by title only, and then we can
Move
just
to read by title only.
Second.
Okay, Carol.
An ordinance of the City of Emeryville amending subsections E and G of Section 5 of Chapter 10 Urban Forestry Ordinance of Title 7 of the Emeryville Municipal Code.
Members of the City Council, Carol Victor, Assistant City Attorney. I'll be brief because this is a brief item. About a month or so ago, you requested that our urban forestry ordinance be amended to provide for appeals to the City Council. The way it currently stands, it can decisions of the the Public Works Director can only be appealed to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission's determination is final. So this amends the urban forestry ordinance to provide for appeals to the City Council, and it also makes it adds a clarifying language that the procedures that are set forth in the zoning ordinance would govern appeals. And that's it. It's fairly straightforward. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
No, I'll open the public hearing.
Okay.
Anybody wishing to speak on this urban forestry ordinance? Oh, come on, rush. Here. I'll close the public hearing.
Move approval.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bukowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Fricke.
Aye.
Vice Chair Cassis.
Aye.
Chair Atkin.
Aye. We have no policy items tonight. We have, under administrative item, we have an informational report. Pat?
I'm going to briefly use the overhead here to summarize the comments here. This item relates to the capital improvement program discussion that the council conducted on October 21st. And there were a number of funding decisions that the council made at that time. And what this informational report does is captures those decisions, and this is an opportunity for us to come back and touch base with the council, make sure that we have heard what you did on the 21st correctly, and then if we have it right, what we would do from here is to take these capital improvement program summary sheets and take them to the Planning Commission at their next meeting for a finding of consistency with the general plan. We would then finalize the capital improvement book and bring that back to the council for a final adoption, we hope in the second meeting of December. So I won't go through all of these tables because the first three tables I think that there was consensus on, and so I will skip over those. What I would like to do is call your attention to page 4. And on that page, I'll just quickly walk through. This was really the essence of the discussion on the 21st. So after you affirmed that approximately 50 projects that you have in progress right now would continue to move forward, and you also affirmed that the ones that needed some additional funds would receive that funding. You then started the discussion about discretionary funds available and new projects based on this page. And so one of the things, the first things that the council did was to look at unfunding some previously funded projects that had dropped in priority. So that included wayfinding signage, lighted crosswalks, the frontage road median, and the shell mound median. And by dropping those projects, you were able to generate about $850,000 in capital improvement monies. This second list of projects here, the Police Administration Building and Recreation Facility, the council gave direction to push those into the next funding cycle, which would be in 2009. And that then yielded another $20.5 million. So between the two of those, you created about $21.5 million in resources that could be allocated to new projects. And that is captured in the middle of this page here. There was extensive discussion about these projects. The Bay Water Pump Station, Park Avenue Park acquisition, funding the Doyle Street Park improvements, funding the Cultural Performing Arts Interim Arts Center, the Community Choice Aggregation Project, the Skateboard Park, the Triangle Neighborhood Traffic Calming Project, Quiet Railroad Crossings, East Emeryville Lighting, Emeryville Greenway, the balance not yet constructed, the South Bayfront Pedestrian Overcrossing Bridge, the 53rd to 55th Street Path, the bridge over Temescal Creek, over I-80 at Temescal Creek, and the Emeryville Crescent Path. You decided to do a study on that for $200,000. The pedestrian activated signal at Powell and Doyle, geographic information system, and the public safety radio system. So when you were done adding those projects, you came up to about $27 million. So you were about $5.5 million more in the way of new projects than you had resources available, and you directed staff to come back to you with some ideas about how that gap could be closed. So this bottom table at the bottom of the page here is our recommendation to you for finalizing the capital improvement program and bringing it into balance. So we're suggesting that the Quiet Railroad Crossings, that the construction portion of that project be pushed to 2009. That still gives you $70,000 in this project to proceed with a study, a feasibility analysis. And we think it'll probably take a couple of years for us to work through that analysis and all the various regulatory entities. So that may work from a timing standpoint before you need to fund it anyway. And then there's this bigger regional effort about improving that whole rail and the port capacity that EDAB is doing that we need to coordinate with. Then secondly, the Emeryville Greenway block, the section of it going from the Pulte Elevation 22 project to 59th, we're suggesting that might be delayed until we conclude this.
What's mid-block mean?
Well, this project right now that's under construction only goes from the corner halfway up the diagonal and stops because we don't have the property.
The Collins property, right?
Right.
Gotcha.
So that Collins property is subject to the RFP that you'll be considered, that you authorized issuance of a month ago, and that you'll be considering further. So that piece of the Greenway could be delayed until we get that property acquisition piece put in place. Then the next project is the San Pablo Avenue Development Assistance Program. That had about $3.7 million in resources that could be used for other projects, and we're recommending that you take about 2.1 of that and allocate it to these to this funding gap. That would still leave you with about $1.5 million in that program to undertake development assistance, property acquisition, et cetera, on San Pablo Avenue. Then the Geographic Information System project, we're suggesting that you take $600 of the $800,000 and push that out to 2009. That would leave you with $200,000 in the short term to do some immediate GIS and information system upgrades. And then finally, the public safety radio system. This is one that that is a regional effort, and that we're not clear on the timing yet. It might be one that we can push off to 2009. Although obviously, if there's a solution that comes up in the shorter term, we would need to be able to respond to it. We might have to come back and revisit this decision and move monies back around. But as you know, you have a total program here of about $140 million. You're not going to be able to build it all at one time. So over this next 2-year period, if we need to shift monies around, we'll be able to do that. So that's kind of that bottom table is probably the one discretionary piece of this that you haven't seen before. And then the final table I'd like to draw your attention to is the Table 5, which is in 2 parts. So the top part of it is the remaining unfunded projects. So you have a number of projects here that you're deciding not to fund in the short term, not to fund in 2009, but that would be pushed off into the future. And this list of projects are ones that you still want to consider. This was what we discussed, the possibility of possibly doing a general obligation bond to address some of these needs, and that'll be part of that discussion that we'll be having soon about doing some polling of the community. Then this bottom list of projects were projects that you deleted. So the first 4 are the ones that you already saw earlier in the earlier table, are projects that had previously been funded that are being unfunded. And then the balance of those are projects that were new projects that you decided not to consider further. So that's a summary of this, what we think we heard and where we think we are, and we just want to be sure that we have that correct. And if we do, we'll continue forward and then come back with the final book.
Okay, Patrick, I specifically sent you an email requesting that the funding for the acquisition of the AC Transit site be on this agenda as an action item, so that could be eliminated, and it's not on the agenda. So how do we get that accomplished? We put that on the next agenda?
Well, I responded, Councilmember Bukowski, that this could be discussed tonight as part of this whole discussion about the capital improvement program.
I wanted to make a motion that we eliminate the AC Transit site as a consideration for the community center of life. I've never believed that that site is realistic, that we're going to acquire it. Andy Getz spent 10 years trying to relocate that bus yard, and I don't think you have 3 votes to fund the relocation of the bus yard, so I think it's time we eliminate that site from consideration and then move on with this project. Because that's one of the reasons that I haven't participated in any of these activities, is because I never believed that AC Transit was a reality. Acquiring that site was a reality, and we're just going to spin our wheels and we spent $500,000 studying something that's never going to happen, and I don't think it's ever going to happen if we pursue it at that site. So if we want to get this project rolling, and we're serious about it, it's time to eliminate the AC Transit site from consideration, and I would so move.
Second.
Now, before we take this vote, I'd like to get the understanding that if there are not 3 votes to eliminate it, when it comes time to spend this money, it would require 3 votes to provide funding. Is that correct, Mr. City Attorney?
That's correct.
So if you have 2 votes that don't support funding this project and 1 person eliminated, then the project can't be funded. So we might as well save time and eliminate that site right now, and then move forward with pursuing other sites to complete this project.
Before, I just wanted the record should reflect that I recused myself from this discussion since I work for AC Transit.
Call the question.
Yeah, call the roll.
Councilmember Bukowski.
Aye.
Councilmember Davis.
No.
Councilmember Fricke.
Aye.
Mayor Atkin.
No.
So how would you propose to move forward with the acquisition if you don't have the 3 votes to acquire the site?
That issue is not before the council this evening.
So you want to continue to spend $7,000 a month on a consultant, and you want to continue to spend money monthly on something that you cannot accomplish, is that
That
right?
issue is not before the council tonight,
That's not
Ken.
on the agenda.
Isn't it
Not on the
appropriate?
agenda.
Isn't it appropriate for discussion, Mr. City Attorney, since we are
That
discussing the funding?
that contract is separate from our capital improvement program.
Okay, well, continue to fund something that's not possible. That really makes a lot of prudent sense. Very well.
Joshua, you want to speak to this?
I'm deeply saddened that at this point, after been working on this for about 15 months now, based on a 4-year community process, with intensive meetings with the community as to what could happen and what the potential is for the city and school working together. And I think to say at this point, after 15 months on such a large project, to say that it's not doable is really trying to cut off a fabulous community effort and effort to invest in the people of Emeryville, an effort to create amenities before it's had a chance to get to this point. I think I do think that the Center for Community Life can happen, and I think it would be regrettable to cut off that effort when it's at such an exciting, seminal moment. And I think it would be a terrible slap to the community effort and to the hundreds and hundreds of hours of meetings that people throughout Emeryville have been having to do this and will be continuing to do this. So I think it would be sad to proceed with in the direction you're going, and I think it would undercut a lot of community effort to create great community amenities.
Well, let me say, I cannot imagine how we can continue on a path to do something that is not a reality. We have spent over $500,000. You continue to have people excited about something that's not real. When are you going to recognize that the bus yard cannot be moved? It has to be moved in the neighboring area. There's no one that's going to accept it. Andy Getz has spent 10 years trying to move that before this effort even started. Why do you want to continue to pursue something that wastes so much money and takes so much out of this community that's not possible?
You're making a number of statements that simply
okay.
That
So
for one, I don't think it would be fruitful to have a long debate and to take up the council's time with a long debate at this point, because you've clearly made up your mind about something which simply isn't true.
At what point do you decide that something's not possible? 20 years? 25 years? I mean, if you want the Community Center of Life project to move forward, the thing to do is to put this site behind us and let's move forward with the project. That's something I can fully support. But to continue to pursue a lost effort is foolish, very foolish.
We have a disagreement. I've been doing large community developments for 20 years. I know that this is a doable project. I know that the community can have these community facilities. And I know that there's a lot going on, that there's a lot of great efforts that are going on, and to cut it off after 1 year is to create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I'm not trying to cut it off.
And it's simply bad policy.
I'm trying to divert those efforts into some other area that's possible. I'd like to see this project happen, but it can't happen where you want it to happen, and not anytime soon. How long are we going to pursue a dead path? That's what I have to say, and I think that's realistic. Why don't we talk to Andy Getz, who tried 10 years to relocate that bus yard, and see what his results were?
Ken, I would just invite you to come on Thursday to the city school committee.
The other thing that I suggested in the email is that the entire city council should be part of the city school committee meetings, not just the whole school board and 3 members of this council. I mean, this is a project that is of such a magnitude that you need full community support. To just blow off 2 members of the council because you have a majority of the council is not the right way to approach this
Well,
project. It should be like the city of Green Bay, when they got the Green Bay Packers. The whole city was behind it, and that's what this project takes before you spend $200 million of the city money.
There are lots of ways for you to get involved, and I think anybody who's been involved in the project would invite your participation.
Okay, and we're going to continue to pursue AC Transit even though it's not even feasible to accomplish that, much less, how much money is too much?
exactly.
How much money is too much money? At what point do you draw the line and you say, gee, this is more than we can afford?
There's a lot of things that you're saying that are just inaccurate.
Oh, well, okay, I'm just totally wrong. Fine.
So,
You continue to pursue it, go right ahead. I'll be happy to attend the meetings, and that's that.
good, I'll see you Thursday.
Great?
Patrick, I think you've captured the CIP decisions.
I wanted to talk about a few things, if I may. Are you wrapping up, or?
Well, I want to talk about the CIP synopsis.
Okay,
So that he can move that to the Planning Commission.
Right, well, I wanted to make some changes. Should I do that now? Should I try to do that now, or are you wrapping up?
On the CIP?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is this are the changes you're making, you don't agree that this is what has happened?
Page 5 did not happen on Saturday, October 21st. You know, we did not decide to delete all of these projects, and so I would like to ask that some of these projects not be deleted from the unfunded list. It's not as though this is money that's committed.
Yeah.
So can I talk about that?
John, as a matter of fact, I wanted to talk about that too, because I agree with you. I don't think we should categorize this as deleted.
Deleted.
Because these are still projects that, you know, if we get more money and we do more things, we certainly, there's an interest there. So I agree with John. I would categorize them in a different way, but I would talk about all of them.
Well, Nora, do you think that there should be 2 categories of unfunded projects? Because what I hear you're saying, because I was going to go through the deleted projects, the ones that I wanted to talk about, and get them into the top, the upper category,
well,
remaining unfunded projects.
Why don't we, I think it would still be accurate to say that we decided not to pursue the frontage road median, the Showmount median, the wayfinding signage program, or the lighted crosswalks.
And none of those I'm seeking to take off of the deleted list.
So from below that point,
yeah, those are the ones.
why don't we just move that to
Well-
unfunded projects?
Well, let me
Could we
just,
say proposed, not funded?
well, let me just say, out of those 4 that you mentioned, I would like the wayfinding signage project to remain not deleted, because we put a lot of time and effort into that, and we still don't have a good way, even though we're small, of directing people around town. And, you know, I don't put that as important as other things, but I don't want to just say that it falls off the face of the earth either.
Can we say proposed if available funding?
Well,
Proposed
So-
projects?
Something that
why not
softens
just have
deleted.
why not just put them all in the same bucket? I mean,
Pat,
it's all we're
Well,
arguing
as a
over the
matter of
silliest
fact-
thing, because none of these
Yeah,
get funding. So
we don't know that. If you consider this square mile city, it's a little unusual that we are talking in terms of $150 million worth of money on projects. So anything is possible in this city. We don't want to lose these deleted projects. We need a different.
We should name them differently.
Yeah, but
Why
I still
name
think,
it
I still
differently?
think we should maintain 2 categories, because I think that staff has correctly pointed out that in the upper category, there was much broader support for those
Right.
projects than there were in the lower category.
okay, well, can I?
Proposed but not a list.
Okay, well then I'm going to have to march us through some of these that I want in the A list, if I may.
Yeah, but
We
No,
already
but this is
made those.
this is
But
stuff
that's
we.
trying to-
No, that's not the case.
that's
I think
changing
that's
the
it's
decision.
inaccurate. It's inaccurate. Simple as
No, I
that.
don't think
If
so.
if I could make a suggestion, these projects on both of these lists aren't anything that you're contemplating funding now
Right.
Right.
or in 2009. So that's 2 funding cycles.
So we don't want to
So-
lose them.
So I would suggest that you just simply make it one category of unfunded projects, and then when you come and redo your capital improvement program 2 years from now, you can look at these and decide if you want to move them up or
Yeah,
down.
that's what I suggested. One
All right.
bucket. Okay, thank
You all
you.
agree on that?
Yes.
Moving
I'm
along.
Great.
okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate
So,
that.
I guess the only thing I would say in terms of the CIP thing is I'm still, of what we decided to fund, I'm still not thrilled with the location of the skateboard park under 580. And I'm not sure why we have to say
well, yeah,
at 580.
Well, that's exactly it. That's actually
as that
That's-
project description.
that's an inaccuracy. I think that on last Saturday, we decided that there was
Well, just
there wasn't
eliminate
clarity.
580.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
so-
retitle it.
All right.
Retitle that.
Okay, if I can talk about a couple other things. When we were talking about the Shell Mountain Powell Street Bridge improvements, Dick asked me, well, is that a priority? And I said that I'd be prepared not to fund that if one of the bridges across the freeway got funded for parity's sake. None of the bridges across the freeway got funded, although we did fund $200,000 for a study. Now, just to digress a little bit on the study, my understanding is that is, and I think we didn't resolve this, actually. We talked about this, but we didn't resolve it. My question is, what is the scope? I think that the scope should be studying a path along the Emeryville Crescent to the Bay Bridge. And the reason I think that and the reason this might not be an obvious thing is because half of that, or maybe 40% of that, is in Oakland.
I would suggest that when we go to awarding a contract for this study, that's the time that we talk about the scope of work.
Well,
And for heaven's
well,
sakes, don't do it in a subcommittee meeting.
But truly, John, we talked that one out. And what I said was, I wasn't ready to spend money on a study from Emeryville's border on down around the Crescent, even though I believe this should happen. And so I said, let's do it incrementally. Let's get our part built. So, I mean, I'm committed to go forward with this and find out if we can do it. And kind of as a side thing, you know, if we can get the Bicycle Coalition people to get back on board against their Sierra Club friends and get interested in this, to where there's some regional interest in something, even
I'd
though...
like to get the Bay Trail people
Yeah,
to
the Bay
fund this.
Trail, yeah. But we had this discussion in full and concluded at the end, the votes were there to say we're only going to look at our coming over the freeway to, you know, to the east side to Emeryville and going to the Shell station.
Well, here's why I think it's important. A big part of studying this conundrum is studying the habitat. And I think that's going to be a big part of the cost. And I think that's going to be a 2-year study. And we can talk about this when we actually talk about funding this, but what's going to happen is you need to study the habitat along the entire crescent, which will include this section in Oakland. If you study it only in Emeryville for the purpose of doing just the Emeryville portion, then what it would mean is if you're going to then extend to the Bay Bridge, you're going to have to do another whole 2-year study on the habitat of this other section. Now, you can argue that the habitats should be quite similar, but if it's not studied, it opens the door for objection. So that's just my comment. We don't have to decide it now. I'm just making that comment.
Thank you.
That it's, I think that it really should be studied in.
I'll tell you, let me make a
We
comment.
clearly shouldn't be doing this alone. We clearly should be doing it with the Bay Trail organization.
Let me make a comment here, which I think is really appropriate. I think the bridge that we want to build over the freeway at Temescal Creek is a very important project, and I think we can accomplish that project by using the San Francisco only lane without going into the habitat. I think if we can accomplish that project, and we can get the support for that, that eventually we can consider the path along the Crescent. I think the path along the Crescent has so much opposition that we're not going to get the regional support we need to do it. But I think the project that would build that bridge over Temescal Creek would be an incremental way of getting to that point.
Oh, yeah, I fully see that
So in
argument.
other words, I wouldn't want to delay the
I'm not talking about
The
delaying.
bridge.
I'm
yeah,
talking about...
the bridge by trying to study the habitat at the same time.
Oh, no, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to do that because
It's an
the
environmental
bridge
impact statement.
is going
That's right.
to is going to be next to the habitat.
Yeah, but
So
it's
let
not
me
going
just
to, okay.
Okay, let me just dovetail on the San Francisco only ramp. About a month and a half ago,
Is this on the CIP
Yeah.
synopsis
this is
here?
on the where do I put this? I guess on the study, and it relates to Ken's argument for the ramp. A month and a half ago, I emailed Caltrans and BCDC and sent them links to my website, and BCDC got back to me right away. Caltrans only got back to me a week ago, and they said, no, we want our San Francisco only on-ramp.
You're kidding.
That's what they said. I'll forward
Yeah,
you
I
the
saw
message.
Switcher.
I saw that
Well-
response, but you know what? That San Francisco only on-ramp is worthless if we don't allow the U-turn on Powell Street. So once we cut off the U-turn on Powell Street, that San Francisco only ramp is
Okay.
useless.
I like that talk. Okay, so that's it for the
You have
comments on
500
the
cars an
back.
hour, Nora, making that U-turn on Powell Street to use that ramp. So once we don't allow the U-turn, the ramp is worthless. In fact, they didn't want that ramp to begin with. They wanted the hook.
Exactly.
So, but now they decided that it's okay.
Okay, can we
'cause
let John finish and move along?
Yeah.
We
So
all
I
want
was
to go to the parties.
right.
Keep going.
I was talking about the Powell Street Bridge improvements, and I had said that I would be prepared to put that off if one of the bridges across the freeway was funded. I said no, that in fact none were funded, and so I would like the Powell Street Bridge improvement funded, because I had said on Saturday that my only reservation about not funding it is if a freeway bridge was funded. So my motion is to fund the Powell Street Bridge improvements and to reduce the amount allocated to purchase the bus yard. I assume that that's going to go down, but that's my motion.
Second.
This is a,
I'd call the question.
This is an informational report. It's
Right.
not to change decisions that were made on Saturday, October 21st. And so I don't know if your motion is really appropriate, because this is not,
Well, you know, who decides this point of order? I
The
made a
mayor.
motion and it was seconded.
Well, this shouldn't have
So
been on the
it's out
agenda
of
as an
order.
informational report anyway, because if you're trying to recap and make corrections to what was established, I mean, what's the point of making it an informational report? So you got to come back with another meeting to do the same thing that you're going to do now?
I mean, the outcome seems foregone, so I don't see what the objection is. I simply am closing a loop that I had mentioned on Saturday. In other words, I was prepared not to fund the Powell Street Bridge improvements if a freeway bridge was funded. It was not funded. I am now seeking this funding. So I made a motion, it was seconded. If it's out of order, then we can have that debate.
is it out of, I would ask the people who know parliamentary procedure to offer an opinion if this is out of order.
Well, I think it's certainly, the whole report came to you as an informational report to try and recapture what had occurred back on the 21st. And I think we've already had that vote. But
Well, number one says, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mike, but number one says staff recommends the council directs staff to finalize the CIP. Well, I'm now trying to finalize for the consideration by the Planning Commission. So, you know, if the City Council wants me to bring this up when it actually comes back, that's fine. But I just think that this is the mopping up time. I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, it's
I think it really would be more appropriate, John, if you brought it up when it comes back for the final consideration. That's that's just my input to you.
Right, I understand, and I don't see why we can't decide this. I mean, we're
You're not
taking
gonna
more
get the votes
time.
anyway, so just let it go to the planning
No,
commission.
I'd like to resolve this. I mean, I reserved this comment on Saturday, and so it seems like it's a simple matter to dispense with.
Well, I would
because
call
think
the
it's gonna-
question.
Well,
Good,
I need
thank
to
you.
ask for some clarification from the city attorney then, because the motion says that is to take the money from the Center for Community Life for the purchase of the bus yard. So if it's that specific, I mean, my belief is the money that we've set aside for the Center for Community Life is for the Center for Community Life wherever that exists. But if the narrowness of the motion is specifically to the bus yard, then I guess I need to recuse myself.
Well, I'm just going with what the budget document has.
Right,
I mean, originally, the budget document, the original budget document for that meeting referred to the bus yard. But
Okay.
I think that the city council changed it, that's fine.
That's right.
I mean, that doesn't change my motion. I could change the motion if you want. I can say that it removes 15 million from the 25.55 million, line 28 on page 2. So you can vote on it, and I assume you're going to vote no.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't, you made your original motion. If you want to stick with that, I'll just step aside while you guys
No,
vote on
no,
it. That's okay.
I'm not intending to
Okay.
I'd call
cause
the
you.
question on your final motion.
Thank you.
I guess we need to make, do we have a second of the revision?
Yeah, I second it.
Okay.
Of course.
Call the roll.
Okay.
Of
And,
course,
and
yeah.
Mike, I'm okay voting on this one, I
Yes.
guess. Okay.
Councilmember Bukowski.
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
No.
Councilmember Fricky.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Cassis.
No.
Mayor Atkin.
No.
Okay, I have one more thing, and that is that in the report, there's a discussion about the Adeline bicycle path, and I appreciate that, or I recognize that the city council chose not to fund the Adeline bicycle path. The staff report talks about, on page 3, talks about restriping Adeline as a 2-lane road with bike lanes on either side. When I was seeking some kind of change to Adeline, my first and foremost goal was to reduce the travel lanes from 4 to 2, because I don't see that 4 lanes is necessary for Adeline. And I think I even said, well, let's just put grass in, anything, just get it down to 2 lanes. And so what's suggested in the staff report makes sense to me. I don't think it's as good as having segregated bike paths, but I'll take what I can get. And so my question now is, is there a plan for this restriping? I mean, is this just a suggestion, or and if we do have some sort of plan, it seems very rational, prudent to test this, if there is a plan, at the same time that we're testing the triangle traffic calming. You'll recall that we're going to have a test period, so we don't put in the permanent, and then we see how it works. Okay, so if we do that, and then we do the restriping, the staff report suggests restriping after Adeline is slurry sealed. So in fiscal year 06-07, Adeline gets slurry sealed, and then presumably we do this restriping 4 lanes to 2 lanes. So my suggestion is that we test this 4 lanes to 2 lanes before we do the slurry seal. And if that makes sense, then it seems to make sense to test it during our test period, not start both. I wouldn't say start both on the same day, but maybe do a month of the of the traffic calming on the side streets, and then do the 4 lanes to 2 lanes on Adeline. That's
How would we, Hank, without doing the slurry seal, how feasible is that?
Well, you'd have to at least slurry out the lane lines,
Right.
and start over again.
What
You
kind
can't.
of rough cost, I mean, to do the test?
Well,
I know it's a ballpark number, I mean, it's not anything specific.
Labor, cost, and paint, 2 times.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be better off reslurring the whole street.
Well, no,
And
obviously.
it's something that we had we've started putting the plans together for doing that, and I'd rather, we have an estimate of what that is. I don't know what it is
Yeah.
right now. I can respond to that, to the
I mean, I think it's
council at a
worth
later time.
looking at. So let's get the cost of just knocking out the stripes and, and restriping on a test, and let's see how much that is to
Hank,
do
were
the
you going to
test.
re-slurry spring of '07?
Well, yes, we were trying to get it in this before the fall, but
You won't be
it
doing
just
it
didn't
until
work.
spring of
Right.
'07. But that will almost dovetail with when we're doing the triangle traffic calming. So rather than double costs on the Public Works budget, I think we can accomplish this in the spring.
Yeah, that's,
We're not going to be painting in the rain anyhow.
okay, yeah, I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
We
well,
could,
it's just,
if you'd
I'm
like, we
confident
could
that-
report back to the Public Works Committee on
Good.
that.
Okay. John, are you through?
I am, thank you
Mayor,
very much.
I have two items, and one of them is sort of digging up where John just was in a way. This is back to Powell Street, overcrossing. At the meeting, I was the only one that wanted to keep some funding in. Now, I just voted not to take it away from the Center for Community Life, but I just want us to consider, we all agree we need the Bay Street overcrossing, and that's going to be fantastic. And so that'll give us the...
You're talking about over the railroad tracks?
Over the railroad
behind
tracks, yeah.
Novartis.
Yes. yeah.
Okay.
So we need the one from Novartis into Bay Street. But I believe that people are going to continue to cross Powell Street regardless of when we get that in. And it's really unsafe with people out there on those little tiny...
You're talking Powell Street from Hollis to Christie. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. This is something that we're going to be bringing up in the community preservation. We need to do something about lighting
Well,
underneath
that's
there.
part of what I was gonna say, and cleaning it
that
up
area.
and making...
Right. But this is something that we perhaps could inch out of community preservation funds. We're on that. We're going to be
Okay.
talking about
Now,
that Thursday.
I'm good for that, because I think we have to do that
Yeah.
as a minimum. But I'm suggesting that we go back and look at Powell Street, at the Powell Street improvements, because I think people, even if we fix up the other one, it's always going to be subpar. People aren't going to feel comfortable there, and they're going to continue to walk across the Powell Street Bridge. So I think even when we get the other one south of there, that we need to make improvements to the Powell Street Bridge.
You're absolutely right. And at the Public Safety Committee meeting, that was really brought out about people sleeping under there and all
That's
the
right,
problems that
yeah.
really exist
Yeah.
there. That has to be cleaned up.
That's
So
right.
tonight's not the time to do that, but necessarily, but I'd like to get this agendized. I know you want to get this kind of formalized, Pat, and get it off to the Planning Commission, but I'm just sort of serving notice now that I would like us to reopen the discussion as to the Powell Street improvements. And I recognize we don't have the $15 million, and we would have to look at taking that from somewhere else, or doing it in some kind of phases. But I just think we need to get a plan for not just the cosmetic things and the lighting and the safety and the cleaning up, but making that a full-service overpass.
I can't imagine with Site B coming in, how that could not be an integral part of their project. I mean, how could you have a dismal overpass like that right adjacent to Site B?
Exactly.
That's going to have to be cleaned
Well,
up big time.
Well, that's the point that I made at the
Exactly.
CIP meeting. If we were to approve Site B, and if we are to approve the TMG project, those are two developers that would benefit from
Exactly.
those improvements. So it seems to me we might get funding privately and not have to spend public money.
Yeah, but they
Exactly.
want those developers. I mean, the Site B people want $27 million from us. I
But
mean,
the immediate need to take care of Powell Street, though, is very apparent, especially after the Public Safety Committee meeting. There's people sleeping under there. The police can't get there because there's a fence, and there's no way for them to even get in there to patrol it. It just has to be taken care of. Even if we have to put out the money and get it back from the developers, something's got to be done about that.
All right, well,
Okay, have we made an action here to have Patrick take this to the...
Wait, one more point, and then I'm done. Pat, did you want to say something on this?
Well, I just wanted to, if I could. So there's some short-term things that the Community Preservation Task Force is going to look at for cleaning it up and relighting it that will be low cost. So we'll do that regardless of what happens
But I would
with
like
the
them to look
CIP.
at cameras at the same time. That ups the cost some, but
That's not low cost.
Yeah,
Let Pat
we'll
finish.
look at
Can
it.
be.
And then, in terms of the larger improvements, I think that the recommendation number 2 that you have here tonight, that you, a recommendation that you instruct staff to go pursue some alternative revenue sources. So looking at the feasibility of a GO bond and other revenue sources, this is exactly the kind of project that could be funded in that way that I'm hearing is a priority, but just not enough to, to be captured in this initial
We've
phase.
talked about a parks and landscaping bond for years.
And that's one of the things that we're looking at, that we have a consultant looking at is is there a way of doing some kind of an assessment type of funding mechanism for some of these improvements. So we'll be back to you with those
Right.
ideas.
I mean, and that was part of our dilemma, is we know we're going to have to go to folks for help, and we got to figure out our strategy. We can't go to the well too many times. But anyway, I'm glad everybody seems to be in agreement that we need to do something there with Powell Street. So I want to get to my second point, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time to Hank for not I just didn't have time today to call you about this, but this has to do, since we've said we're going to fund the overcrossing from Novartis to Bay Street, the shopping center there. I know that the plan that we don't have to do anything about it tonight, but I just want to put you on alert so that maybe you can gather some information on this. The plan that we had talked about when we kind of shelved it was that was supposed to be Cortan steel. And what I would like to ask you to do is gather the information from the city of Berkeley, because they studied that, I'm told, by somebody in their planning area for the bike ped overcrossing that they created at university, and they determined that that was not a feasible way to do it, because in this environment, salt environment, it becomes brittle and it will not last for the long term. So they abandoned using that, and that's why they ended up with a painted structure. So I may have part of that wrong, but if there's any substance to that, I would like us to, without going out and doing our own study, take benefit from whatever it is that Berkeley's done, and let's get a hold of that before we get too much further down the line with planning our other
Dick,
bike ped
when that
overcrossing.
issue came up, I ran that by Professor Astani, the expert that I worked on the Bay Bridge, and he said that steel would be acceptable for the bridge.
Right, but I'm just saying Berkeley went through a whole planning thing and rejected it. And there may be other reasons that I don't know about why they did that. I'd just like to find out what they found out. And I have a lot of respect for him.
Okay, I think you got a synopsis or reiteration. So let's move on to B.
Move approval of Sheila Higgins.
Second.
She'll be a good addition.
Any objections? That's unanimous. Public Employment City Attorney. First is a resolution approving a second amended and restated agreement of employment. You want to say something here, Michael?
No, not unless you want me to.
You're
Before you,
standing up here.
no, before
I'd
you
move
is
approval of the
advised.
resolution.
Second.
I want to say that I think that approving this revised contract is inappropriate. I don't think that his work deems this to happen. I don't find his employment acceptable. I would not vote for this revision, nor would I vote for a revision of his contract at a future date.
My only comment is I think that the contract should be honored, and I generally don't think that contracts should be revised unless there's consideration. I don't see that in this revision, so I will vote no for that reason.
I think it's very clear that the action of a council member on this council is the reason that we are considering this second amended and restated agreement.
So my
with
criticism of the city
Councilmember-
attorney means that you give him more money, right?
Councilmember Bukowski,
Yeah?
please don't interrupt
Oh, I
me
wouldn't
when
want to
I'm
interrupt
speaking.
you. You know.
Thank you.
Certainly not.
And I would like to say that Mr. Biddle has served this city well and faithfully, and if you look at the accomplishments and the considerable work that has been done both by Mr. Biddle and the legal department, we are well served, and I certainly approve this agreement.
So there's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Pikowski.
No.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Fricke.
No.
Vice Mayor Cassis.
Aye.
Mayor Atkin.
Aye, and I'd just like to thank
If I
you.
can't say anything bad, you can't say anything good, so, you know.
I'd just like to thank you for the revision that brings this into compliance with the government code section that you cited. The second is discussion of agreement of employment.
Yes, as you know, the agreement does provide that within 6 months that the parties would agree to renegotiate the terms of the agreement 6 months prior to the expiration. It expires, as you're aware, in June of 2007. 6 months prior is the end of December here, and what I would like to do is start having some discussions with the council about securing reemployment beginning in July of 2007. And if there's that mutual interest, I want to let you know that I'm likewise, I would like to continue to serve the city of Emeryville, and so I'm looking for some feedback from the council and whether we can start having some discussions on that course so that we can at least try and wrap this up. I would prefer by the end of this year or early next year, so that if that there is an agreement, then I'm aware of that, and if not, then there's plenty of time for me to start looking at other opportunities.
Mayor Atkin, I would propose that we have an evaluation of the city attorney and a discussion of his contract at the second meeting in December.
I was going to suggest that we put it off to February.
It has to be 6 months before, according to the contract.
Oh, so, okay.
It comes up in June.
All right, I'll go along with that. We could put that on the
That'd be
closed
fair.
session agenda item.
All right. Second meeting in December.
Are
Anybody
you
have
talking about a
problem?
full-fledged evaluation?
Yeah,
Or no?
Absolutely.
Or are we talking about,
formal
The-
evaluation.
A formal evaluation.
but just an evaluation I don't think is necessarily what I hear Mike saying. It's to discuss whether we want to continue him in our employment at the end of this contract period.
An evaluation and a discussion of the
Okay,
contract, okay?
I'm with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Communications and report, department heads. Council members.
I have a couple things. Way back when, not sure when, I suggested that a letter be written to Barbara Lee regarding the ability of cities to condemn railroad property. My understanding is that federal law prohibits that. And my strategy was to have Barbara Lee float a bill that would change that. Of course, that would have a snowball's chance in hell, but at least it would get some attention from Union Pacific, and maybe they would be more interested in talking to us about selling what they call the Emeryville yard next to the future Horton Landing. And so I'm wondering where that is. We agreed to send this letter, and I think that was some time ago, so I'm curious what happened to it.
I remember having a conversation with Karen Hempel about it, and this was months and months ago, but there were complexities to even being able to do that, that I don't recall.
Sending a letter?
If I can, I actually did.
Microphone.
Can you hear me?
There.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You told me to stick it in my face. I actually have done some research on that, John, and I thought it had been decided, and I'm sorry, apparently I dropped the ball in getting the communication back to you. What we would like to do is write a legal memo to you explaining, because it is fairly complex, and it's not, federal law doesn't prohibit us taking railroad property, but the standards and the findings that have to be made and the procedural process is rather complex, which without opining here, I would like to explain that to you in a memo, and then so there's a better understanding of the issue, and then the council can decide what direction to go forward.
Can we see that at the next meeting, Carol?
When can we have the memo in our mailboxes?
So the next meeting is in 2 weeks, and that may be too soon, but we can do it after that. It's a complex issue, and it has to do with federal administrative procedure, which is not an area that your city attorneys regularly practice in. So I do want to make sure what's put before you is absolutely correct, and so I would like a little bit more time than 2 weeks.
When?
So a month would be the next meeting.
The reason that I think this is important is because, and I guess a month for me is okay, but
Yeah.
but we really should have it by the end of the year. The reason it's important is because we've now decided to fund this bridge across the tracks, and what I fear will happen is, first of all, I don't think the railroad needs that extra track, that side track, and I don't think that the railroad. I think it's easier for whoever is asked at the railroad, can you give up this land, to say no, because they probably fear that they'll be reprimanded for giving up land. I think what's going to happen is we'll build this bridge, and then the railroad will come and say, oh, by the way, we don't need this property, and are you interested? And then we probably would purchase that property, but we will have spent a lot more money spanning this portion of the railroad that we then buy. So the goal is to make the bridge as short as possible. I don't think that the railroad needs the land. I think that some way needs to be found to light a fire under them to get them to make this very logical decision to sell that property to us. So that's all I have on that.
I think it's a good idea.
On Saturday, I was taking Lane and Nina to the Head Over Heels, and the contractor that is working on the old Head Over Heels space closed Spur Alley. This is the section of Spur Alley from 45th to 53rd that the city has an easement for, and so I asked, well, why did you do this? And they claimed that they had gotten permission from the city. I've since asked Pat to do some checking. I don't think that that's the case. They were doing construction on a Saturday, which requires a waiver of the noise ordinance, which I don't think they got. But in talking to Pat, another issue came up. They have previously sought to close Spur Alley on a weekday. Now, a weekday is a time when they can do construction, so they would not need a waiver of the noise ordinance, but they would need to get what's called an encroachment permit, because to close Spur Alley is to encroach upon the city's easement. And what Pat told me is that that the staff has the authority to issue encroachment permits for Spur Alley, and I think that should not be something that the staff can authorize. I mean, I see it as the same as closing a street, and it seems like something that's a pretty drastic thing to happen. So the Spur Alley, I take Spur Alley. I take the girls on the bike. I use Spur Alley to get them to school, so I'm on there every day, every weekday, and it's at least one occasion they've tried to close it on a weekday. So they have quite a bit more work to do, and I just don't think that it makes sense for them to be able to close Spur Alley with just staff approval. I'm asking for the City Council whether we need to change this.
It's probably a good idea, if for no other reason, for public notification, so that when these things happen, the public has a way of being notified, because otherwise there's no way for anybody to know. They just go somewhere and discover that it's closed.
What's from staff, whomever is the right person, what's the scope of these kind of things? I mean, is it just spur alley, or does it apply to a whole host of things, or, I mean, where do the lines get drawn about when you come to us and when you don't?
You know, I mean, we came to you as it relates as an example for the Wareham project where they wanted to close off, and generally those that initially came to the traffic committee, if I'm not mistaken. And you know, so things that are of a longer duration, those are the items that we generally try to bring to you. Those that may be for a short period of time, for perhaps maybe part of a day, or don't involve the entire closure of a street. You know, we actually have different construction projects that are encroaching onto sidewalks and to bits of rights of way that have been authorized. So it's kind of we try to use our best judgment in those things, but if it's going to be an extended period of closure or partial closure, then we bring it to you. We also brought recently, there was discussion about the, the mini triathlon, where, and the concern about that staff had, it was that while it was only for a short period of time, it was going to be through extended parts of the city, so we brought that as well. But if we had to bring every encroachment into city rights of way, I think that would considerably impede activity in the city.
When the spur alley was closed, does that mean that the parking that usually, the private parking that's usually allowed there was not allowed because there was machinery in the way or something?
They closed Spur Alley on a Saturday morning. All the parents going to head over heels were told, you now have to circle around and enter this parking lot that you normally never use, which is the one off of 47th and Doyle. And so everyone was directed around that way. And it was now, that was a huge inconvenience, but they were clearly in violation of the noise ordinance regarding construction. So I'm not talking about weekends, because if they want to do construction on the weekend, they have to come here to get a waiver of the noise ordinance. I'm talking about a weekday closing Spur Alley. And Mike, I appreciate...
My question still stands. Does that mean that the people who usually park there couldn't park there?
Yeah. I mean, they closed the whole thing. I mean, if they do a partial closure, then and let traffic through, then that's okay. That's just, waving people through.
It's not clear to me from your little anecdote, John, that they had an encroachment permit. Did they have an encroachment?
They did not.
They didn't have an encroachment
No,
permit.
it was.
So staff is clearly not at fault here.
Well,
although
there was a I mean,
this is Silverman playing a bandito again.
The staff that they spoke to didn't realize that we have this easement, or to the extent they did, they had forgotten about it. But it is a public easement that they needed our permission to close off, and so we've sort of corrected that to inform staff that yes, we have a property right that they need our permission to close off if they want to do it in the future. And I believe Councilmember Fricke is now saying, okay, to the extent there is a closure, should staff be allowed to do that, or should it come to the council?
The question that I raise here is that whenever a road is closed, whenever anything is changed, where is the public notification? How does a member of the public know that anything is going to happen? Is there some process?
It's not a road, it's a parking.
I said any process, any road, any closure, how does the public become aware of it? Is there any way for the city to put something out there so that people can be aware of it? Can they go to the website and find a spot where we announce that something's going to be closed or changed as a matter of courtesy?
Well, there are two issues. My understanding is that the
Is that ridiculous, Nora?
It's
ridiculous, huh?
Encroachment permit can be done
Take
very
a little
informal.
Prozac, Ken.
The encroachment permit process is very informal. The contractor calls up a city staff member, and it can be oral. And so...
No.
No,
there should be in writing.
No.
We have an encroachment permit form that they're supposed to to fill out and sign. They're supposed to provide proof of insurance, and there's also a deposit.
I don't think that's what happened on Saturday. But
No, it didn't, because they were told that you didn't need an encroachment
right,
permit.
okay, I see.
Why don't we
okay.
do this? Why don't we put this on a future agenda? And what sounds to me like what we ought to do is say if it's a complete closure, then it needs to come to us. If it's not, let's continue on like it is.
That's exactly what I'm asking for, and I'm asking for Spur Alley not to have second-class status, because obviously for the vehicles, where vehicles are, then we have the full-blown city council approval. But where you have pedestrian and bicycle easement, then it's second-class status. The last thing I have is regarding Measure C. A year ago, today's election day, a year ago, the voters of Emeryville approved this ballot initiative that allowed for $9 an hour for hotel employees. And I realized that soon after it passed, the hotels litigated, and that delayed things quite a bit. But my feeling is that the city will ultimately prevail on the suit. We already have prevailed on the hotel's motion for a preliminary injunction, and so I'm wondering where we are now in terms of enforcement.
Well, first, as it relates to the litigation, there is a motion for summary judgment that we have filed that is scheduled to be heard on the 5th of December, so that's where the litigation stands. As it relates to the enforcement, we have sent requests to the various hotels asking them to supply information to document that they are in compliance with Measure C. I know Finance Department staff have been looking at the information that was initially provided. I know that they have subsequently asked for additional information to support their compliance with Measure C, and that's where it is at this point in time. They are undergoing a review. I've also been made aware that in response, I know, I've been told, I haven't confirmed this, that I know a couple of the hotels, I believe it's the Marriott, went ahead and bumped all the room cleaners' salaries up to the time and a half salary rate of $16.83 or whatever that figure was, so that they didn't have to get bogged down into calculating how many square footage of rooms have they cleaned. So my understanding is that the hotel workers at the Marriott who clean rooms have received a substantial raise, and I had heard similar information coming out of related to the Four Points Sheraton, but I don't know that for certain. So that's kind of where we're at, and again, the Finance Department staff are handling that audit.
Could we have a written report before the end of the year about the what the compliance
Well,
is?
the idea is that this information is being submitted as part of their application for the hotel permit. So the idea is once we get through looking at this information, we will come forward with separate resolutions for the hotels that would essentially issue a permit, and those that might have issues of compliance, we could condition those in such a manner to bring those into compliance.
Okay.
I have a couple items.
All right.
4, but none of them are long. First, Hank, I guess this comes back to you. Those, I don't know what we call them, those rubber things we stick out at some crosswalks to try to say, hey, there's people out here. There's still one in front of Pacific Park Plaza.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I know what you
the
mean.
one that's, I know people hit them and ruin them, but the one that used to be just
On
up the
Park.
street here on Park has been missing for a very long time. And I think we need to get an inventory of those so that they can be replaced. I know they're probably expensive, but,
Okay.
okay, can we look at that?
Yes.
The second,
The one at 41st and Adeline got wiped out a long time ago.
Yeah. So, and the next two things are things that I guess would go to the Transportation Committee. The first one would, this is something I'd asked to look at before, and then it really never went anyplace. But if you're coming on the road behind the Catella Center, and you make the right turn on Hollis Street down here, what you run into when you get to the roads coming in and out of the shopping center is there's 2 lanes northbound on Hollis. And I understand that that's in Oakland, so we've got to talk to them. But the right lane of those 2 is a right turn only lane going into the shopping center. And it absolutely doesn't, if we're trying to move traffic around and the impact it has on Emeryville, that makes no sense that it's right turn only, because people get stacked up.
Should be a through lane.
Should be a through lane also. And then when you get past those driveways on either side of Hollis Street, then you can funnel into whatever lanes you need to be in going further, as you approach 40th Street. So I'd like us to look at talking to Oakland to see if they could eliminate the right turn only arrow in the right lane there, if the Transportation Committee thinks that that's wise. So if you guys could take that up. And the second one is one that I have mentioned here before that I think is under our control, and it's Peralta there, and that little street that comes right in front of Vicky Joe's going northbound as it starts to come into the back of the Catella Center. We really need to get a left turn lane northbound to take that road, either to take the roadway behind Catella's or to access the new on-ramp to get
You
up.
can't access the on-ramp there.
Yes, you can. Absolutely, you can. I was just there today.
When I drove underneath from MacArthur.
No, you can't do it from there. You can't do it from driving underneath there.
I did.
But if you
I went onto the freeway.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm talking about if you're coming westbound towards the bay, behind the Catella Center, and you don't want to get onto the freeway.
You can't. There's a K-rail there dividing.
Well, no. But there is a way you can come out of the back of the Catella Center and stay on the little road that's there. You've got to take the Peralta Street.
Right.
You've got to get to Peralta Street.
Right.
By staying inside of the Catella Center. Once you get to Peralta, then you can come out and make the right turn and get onto the freeway, or come down to Hollis Street. And what I'm saying is that the northbound traffic that's trying to make that left turn to do one of those 2 things doesn't have a lane.
On Peralta you're talking
Yeah,
about?
right there.
Yeah, it's a very tough intersection. There's hardly any stacking room.
I know there's not much stacking,
Peralta.
Hank, but it's a very wide place, and there's room enough to have a left turn only lane.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. That's my way to get here from downtown Oakland when
You're
there's a lot of traffic.
northbound at Peralta and MacArthur,
Yes.
and that's Caltrans property, isn't it?
Well, I don't think Peralta is.
Well,
Peralta
but
isn't.
where the intersection is.
Well, I'm not
No?
sure
I
about
think,
that.
I've been told
I
that's
don't think
us. Anyway, could the Transportation Committee take a look at that? I know, I'm not talking about creating a big stacking lane. I'm just talking about, once you get out there, you're kind of just sitting out there by yourself, and it would make sense to me to have a left turn lane there, with just, even if it's only one car.
Can we have the Transportation Committee discuss this?
That's what I asked
Good.
for it to go. Okay, and the last thing doesn't have anything to do with any of that. I just want to not let it go unnoticed, and I want to make sure that word gets back. I'd really like to commend staff, and particularly Ignacio, for the incredible party they threw for John here a week ago Friday. I mean, that was just amazing, and a lot of people participated in it from staff, but I know Ignacio did a lot of the technical stuff for putting together essentially a music PowerPoint retro of Creedence and everybody else in between.
I didn't know he was such a fan of
But anyway,
Creedence Clearwater.
well, that's who John did lighting for. That's why that was the basis for it before he got into his most recent profession. Anyway, if the work could get back to staff, I just think it was incredibly well done, very professional, and a lot of fun. Well, good job.
I just want to announce before I shut off my computer that with 14% of the vote in, Proposition 90 is passing by 52 to 48%.
Okay.
And as I've been watching these numbers, they're going more in the yes than they are in the no. So
Okay.
Didn't help any that it was all by itself on the back side of the ballot.
I guess not.
All right. Well, with that, I'll adjourn the meeting and thank the interim city manager for weathering his first meeting. And we can go watch the election returns.
Frankly, the closed session was probably tougher than the meeting.